ultimately knowledge is power,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like just understanding the background of it, understanding what it is, and being validated why you have those crazy mom moments, right?
Yep. Yeah. I
Knowledge is,
mean, for both of us felt validated, which is a big deal. When you go to therapy, usually one of you feels like, okay, they've got my back.
mhm,
It was not that way. And it's
mhm,
still not that way. When we go to our therapist today, she's still like, I love you both. And I'm going to stand up for you both. Like, I don't have either of your sides,
love
which I love.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So,
Yeah. Okay. So through this process, I was watching a Mama Bear minute you were having an Instagram story, and you were talking about, and I've heard you actually mention this several times now that I've watched several of them, on you realizing you needed to work on you, and how you
mhm.
used to be this judgmental person, which I think human nature, we all are that way. It's like we have to recognize that in ourselves and that it's holding us back. And so you kind of went through that process. But so many women get stuck in, it's his problem. He needs to fix him and himself. What kind of power did you find in you once you discovered that we all have our problems and you had things you needed to work on too? How did you come to that moment, and how has it affected you now that you so openly recognize that, which is incredible and such an example to everyone around you that sees your story.
Thank you. Um, it was really hard, to be honest with you, to say I need help too,
Mhm.
because he'd always gone to 12 step. He'd gone 3 times in our marriage, and I'd never gone because it's his problem. I don't need to do it. I don't have the addiction. And so the first time I went to 12 step, I was kind of like, oh, I do play a role in this. And although I'm not the one with the addiction, I have the effects of what this addiction has brought into our life. Um, so yeah, I played a big role in it, and I still play a role in it. Part of that whole knowledge is power was so that I could gain empathy for myself and what I was going through and who I had once been and had become,
Mhm.
and empathy for my husband. And I think if I hadn't gained that empathy, I don't know that I would have stayed, because that finding that empathy, which is a learned skill, I was absolutely not born with it. Um, I was able to see, like, okay, he really wants this. He wants to be rid of this, but
Yeah.
it's physically hard for him.
Mhm.
It's hard. It's super hard. So, um, I would say, for me to finally own that I had a role in it, one, it was hard. Two, I started comparing my story to other women's stories. Like, I shouldn't be here because my story is not as bad as I'd hear some of these women who their story was heartbreaking, and yet people hear mine and they think, oh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's the whole comparison thing. And so I remember coming home and telling Kobe, I don't know if I want to go to this group because they all have, like, their lives are way harder than mine. I feel like I'm already in kind of a better place. I definitely wasn't in a great place, but so I had to let that go and say, no, I can be just as sad. And that's what I found a lot with this whole betrayal trauma thing is, most women compare their stories to other women, and they don't feel validated in, why do I feel so hurt if it was just an emotional affair? Why do I feel so hurt if he only looked at porn? A lot of the feelings are the same. It's still a betrayal of trust, of that relationship and that connection. And so for me, I did a lot of work for understanding myself and with Kobe. Uh, but then, like last year, I did some EMDR work, which was previous, before we were married, stuff that I needed to work through, that I hadn't ever planned on working through. So that was kind of a bonus. That was an amazing thing for me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's something we actually talk about and work on a little bit. I don't go into huge depth, but the power of our blueprint,
Hmm.
what we bring in with us, right? Everybody has their blueprint, good blueprint. There's good things, and we also have bad things, things that we need to change, and that we have the power to actually go back and change it and learn a new perception and know that we have the power within us to create how we want to be, how we want to react. It's all very conscious, though. If we rely on the subconscious, oh, we're messed up, right? Everything you've done has taken a very conscious effort, I'm assuming, right? You've had to be very
Absolutely.
consciously
Hmm.
choosing each path you've taken. I'm going to go to these meetings. I don't feel like I relate to these women, and you consciously put yourself out there to allow yourself to learn a new perspective. That right?
Absolutely. And, I remember hearing people say, I probably even said it, once a cheater, always a cheater. You start telling people your story and they give you advice, you should leave. Like, why? Because it's always easier to solve someone else's problem than to solve your own. And I learned through this whole process that life is not black and white. And I was that girl who said I would leave if my husband cheated. And then he did it twice and I stayed. And like, it's just not that black and white. And I think part of that is owning my part in the story too. He didn't cheat because of me. No, I absolutely don't believe, in that. But I played a role in that whole disconnection of our relationship. So I do not believe in the once a cheater, always a cheater if you do the work.
Yes, yes. Oh, and I'm adamant. I'm so passionate about that part of, if you aren't happy in your life, what are you doing about it? Right? Like,
Mhm.
so many of us just sit back and choose to feel that unhappiness and whatever, and not, because taking that active step forward, like you already know, is painful.
Oh
Right?
yeah. It's like a giant leap into this unknown and then like a million baby steps.
Oh,
And um, the craziest part, my husband has said this lots of times, but he says it seemed really scary to say I'm going to give up this life and to start a new one and to live in recovery. It was so overwhelming and so scary. But he's like, this life over here in recovery is so much easier than the life I was living before. And it makes no sense, but it's truth.
yeah,
It's truth
yeah.
for us both.
Well, and that kind of makes that statement, the truth of that statement, the truth will set you free.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, once we finally get to that point that we're like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I know it's gonna be so hard. We've been dreading it this whole time, and all of a sudden we get over there on the other side, and we're like, oh, it's not quite as bad as I thought it was gonna be. So
Absolutely.
I think that's a good thing for us to realize when we're in that moment of having to make that decision. It's like, let's learn from other people's stories. Let's look this up.
Mhm.
Let's hear what Ashlynn and Colby have to share about that, because they've been through it, instead of letting that freeze us. Like, so afraid to take
Yeah.
that leap forward, right? So hard. And it probably doesn't help to have the spike in your head.
No.
And I love that when you talked about how you share that with your girls. Um, it's such a great visual, right? It's such a great visual for our children too, to be able to, like, because we do talk about the adversary. We talk about, the dark sources around us and stuff that they still don't want us to have happiness, and to just name it, what Spike's saying. Well, Spike is lying, and having that. So share a little bit, tell the ladies what this spike is in your head and how you relate
Okay.
it to yourself and with women, as well as helping your children understand that self-talk.
Yeah. Awesome. So my daughter Lucy is the one who came up with Spike in her own therapy sessions. She was getting really conflicting messages in her head of that this was her fault that she'd been abused, and she couldn't separate her own like truth from these false truths. And so her therapist helped her by he said, you need to give it a name and start recognizing these thoughts. And then he had her draw a picture. And so she has this monster drawn and she named him Spike. And we started implementing it into our home. So oddly enough, our child taught us this. But it was literally like, it changed our world in our little family because we could separate those thoughts. So my 7-year-old will say, gosh, like Spike is telling me to go and like hit my sister or whatever. She knows and she can separate. I don't want to hit my sister, but I really am being like tempted to go and do this. Right. So Spike sends us all sorts of messages in our house. Mm-hmm. So for Kobe, he started implementing it into the recovery process. And we just started recognizing like we all are experiencing that narrative. And it's a broken record most of the time. He's not very creative and coming up with new things to tell us. It's usually the same crap over and over. You're not a good mom. You don't look good enough, or you don't dress good enough, or like a million things, right? When people tell me their Spike narratives, when I work with women, it's heartbreaking. I hate hearing what people's negative thoughts are, because of course you look at someone and you're like, oh, you're awesome. No, like, how could you believe those things? And so the idea with it is to recognize it. And so we actually encourage people to write it down. Take a week and just start noticing, and whether it's in your phone or on a journal, whatever, not to sit and relish in those awful thoughts, but to see there's probably a pattern. Mm-hmm. And there's most likely maybe some triggers that set off that pattern, whether it's when you're around a certain person or maybe when you're getting dressed every morning. It doesn't matter what it is, but you can help to prevent these narratives if you can figure out where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. And so we recognize them, we see the pattern in them, and we try to find the triggers within them. And we really try to just combat them with the opposite. And so sometimes finding the truth is hard when you really don't know your truth. You don't believe that you are of value or that you are a good mom. The mom thing is probably the number one thing that I hear, that I'm not a good mom. Like, I don't know. I'm maybe not sure I've met a mom who thinks like they're the best mom in the world. I think most moms struggle. Yeah. I'm not feeling like I messed up or my kids are going to hate me or whatever. And so that one's a common one. But so if you can't find your truth, it would be calling your mom or calling your best friend, calling your husband and saying, I need you to speak truth to this because I keep hearing it in my head every single day and I need it to stop. And so someone else can help find your truth if you can't. Yeah. And so for me, it's combating it with the absolute truth and just being, sometimes it's funny. A lady yesterday I was talking to, she said, he's so stupid. I just tell him like, you're so dumb. You're not creative. I've already heard this before and I already know my truths. Like, shut up. And then she just kind of goes through those, like, I know I'm a good mom and I had a hard moment right then, but I'm a good mom. Like, I take care of my kids. They always have food and clothes and that type of thing.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I actually really like how you said in the different therapies that you work with people, have them recognize it for like a week, write them down, because that's something that I feel there's a lot of power. I heard from a friend who heard it from her professor. You have to name it before you can tame it. You have to recognize it first. I like that. Right? And then you know what you need to change. But we have to, and so that's exactly what you do. It's like, not that we want to sit and give it so much attention and dwell in that moment. It's a negative thing. We don't want to dwell there, but we can't change what we don't know is there or not. So we have to take the time to discover it, name it. Okay, I am doing self-negative talk right now. Spike is yelling at me. Write down the thoughts. And like you said, then you might find triggers. You might find, areas that you will be able to heal in. and make Spike shut up even more.
It's crazy because you mentioned people may not even recognize. I offer this like 5-day shame resiliency course online. I do it just because people don't realize how much shame they hold. And I just think if people could figure that out and have more shame resiliency, that we would all get along a lot better, right?
Yeah.
But people, they'll get in the class and they're like, I don't think I have shame. And then they're like, oh my gosh, like it's all day long. And they don't recognize it because it's become their norm.
Yeah.
They're just used to being told they are terrible and worthless and unlovable, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not normal. That's not okay.
Right.
But I think like 80% of our thoughts are negative if we don't tame them.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I imagine that you're a Brene Brown fan.
Yes.
Right? So I'm so grateful that you're sharing that, because I really do believe that shame it is so detrimental. It's life changing. You know, I've watched people that because of shame just turn such a negative direction, you know, and their whole life from that point on totally different, and they can link it back to just a moment of shame. That's how powerful it is. It's extremely powerful. And I mean, tell me if you agree with this, a lot of addiction comes from shame.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. So that's why it was such a big deal. And you can recognize this. It's a huge deal that Kobe wanted to share his story. His shame resilience with his own story is extremely high. People can say all they want, and he's just like, oh, I love who I am now, and that's who I was, but it's not who I am now.
Yeah.
So we have different layers of shame resiliency in our story. We're really high. In other areas of our life, we're not as high. So we're working on it. But it's super common within addiction and betrayal trauma to just struggle with the shame.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They go hand in hand, completely hand in hand. So I love that you have that 5-day shame resiliency program. I want you to share with these ladies that are going to listen to this each avenue of the programs that you have, because I know like Colby has some stuff that he does, you have stuff that you do, and you have stuff you do together. And then share please your story about your healthy living, because I watched that, and I tell you what, seeing your x-rays with the probes or whatever those all are inside your back, right? And looking at your abs, I'm like, okay, nothing's getting this girl down. If she can do this, this is amazing. Absolutely. You have every excuse to not do it, right? Because I'm sure you have a level of pain daily. I'm sure you do. So to see that, Ashlynn, I wish I could express, hopefully it's coming out in the passion that I'm trying to express it in, how powerful of an example that is, that we can push through hard things. It doesn't have to dictate what our life is going to be, but we have to choose to make that conscious effort and not let life dictate who we're going to be. So share all about your programs. I want you to give exposure to all of them, including your podcast. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. So tell the ladies what you have.
Okay. All right. So the podcast we've been doing for 10 months, and we don't edit it. We go into it every Friday at 1 p.m. with a therapist. He's a sexual addiction therapist. He's not our therapist. My husband and myself. So it's 3 different opinions on one topic. And we choose the topic like 2 minutes before we start the video. So it's pretty raw, and I don't know. I love it. It's something that we all look forward to and enjoy doing. And it's just something we do to give. Then we have, with Betrayed Addicted Expert, that part of it, we do offer online workshops for relationships in building trust back in safety into a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
With our story, there's a lot of those problems. That's what everyone's seeking if they're deciding to stay together, is bringing back safety and trust.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about how to do that. Then Kobe and I we do women's recovery groups. So it's more like an accountability group where we have a weekly 75-minute phone call, like just on this, like on Zoom. And we meet with women all over the world who are different religions, different beliefs, but they're all in betrayal trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one of the most amazing, I do it for 3 hours a week. And they're my favorite times because these women are all vulnerable. They're all in it, and they're sacrificing. Some of them are waking up at 4 a.m. to be on these calls, or staying up till midnight. Trying to fit all these different time zones is hard. But we offer that because there's a need. It's very isolating, especially if you don't live where I live. There's a lot of resources. So we also, okay, so there's the women's group, and then Kobe does a men's group. So same idea. I'm not on those calls. Again, men all around the world. And then he does men's one-on-one addiction mentoring. So for people who don't want to have that group setting, they just want that one-on-one time with Kobe. He does that as well. I don't do one-on-one currently with women. The fitness part of it, that's where I started. That's where I always end up. It's the fun part of what we do. There is emotional parts of it, absolutely. But it's really just helping people get started with their simple nutrition and simple workouts. So we only work out 30 to 40 minutes, 5 to 6 days a week. We stopped going to the gym. We started including our kids so they could see it. They don't have to work out, but they're a part of it. So they're usually just dancing and playing. But they see us working out, which is a huge change for our family. And so we really encourage that for other people. So I run online groups for that. So a place for people to come and feel like it's a safe place. They can say, no one's eating healthy around me and I'm struggling. Oh, help me, or they're getting their workouts in, whatever they are, and a place to ask questions. So I do those as well. And it always has a weekly call like this as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And is the best place to find, like, what are the name of your websites for them to come and find you? What are your different?
Ashlynn and Kobe.
Okay.
So Ashlynn and Kobe has our stories and how to get a hold of us. And then if you go to Instagram or Facebook, Mama Bear Fitness, then that's the fitness side of it.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. I really recommend, ladies, that you follow her because she makes me smile. She's so real. You are so real. Like your little chats that you have, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so good that, you're taking time to share this with the world, and you're making a difference. And you've taken a really hard thing in your life from all aspects, from your health because of the health challenges that you've had, to your marriage and Colby's challenges. And you're saying, you know what, guys, this is what's happened. And we're going to push through it. And we want you to join me on this journey. And now all of a sudden, because you know how you said, I had never shared my story. Nobody knew. You know what that alone feeling feels like. And I applaud you for like allowing yourself to be so extremely vulnerable and help other women and men feel like you don't have to do this alone. That's really, really powerful, Ashlynn. It really.
You are too sweet, but thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And I just appreciate, I know just besides busy with all the other things you have going, you're a busy mom and you're going crazy in your own life. So for you to take these few minutes with me, I really appreciate it. It's been really fun to get to know you. And I hope our paths will cross again in the near future. And thank you.
Yeah.
Just thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you for allowing us to be part of your journey. It's really powerful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We will talk soon, hopefully. Thanks so much,
All
Ashlynn.
right.
Bye-bye.